I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
Hi, I'm Traci.
And I'm Kathy.
And this is Curious Explorers. Hi, Kathy.
Hey, Trace.
How's it going?
That's going great. How are you?
Okay. I haven't seen you again in a while. It's been like a crazy few months. And, I wanted to bring you up to speed on some of the stuff while you were in Transylvania hunting vampires and other spooky things. I did interview ghost hunter and author and fellow remote viewer Michael Robartes.
Yes,
and
I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I'm really excited.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I forgot to ask him if he knows Adam, aka Adam Berry, because his ghost hunting kind of arm is part of the TAPS family, the Atlantic Paranormal Society. So, but it was a really interesting interview. It's one of those things that I edited that night. Like I couldn't not get back to it. I had some crazy stuff happening and I had to just say, is this me? Is this, but anyway, just to summarize for you and anybody who hasn't watched it. So Michael is, he does other things too, but he wants to remain an international man of mystery. So I'm not going to out him, but we know each other from the remote viewing world. And, I found out he'd written this book, with his co-author, Paul Conroy, who's actually a huge Bigfoot person. So I learned a lot about Michael and about their journeys together and his paranormal experiences. And you and I have talked, we both have had paranormal, but also psychic experiences forever. And but a lot of times it's kind of intermittent for me.
Right.
And when Michael, I'm telling you, this was like an hour-ish interview. My hair's almost standing up as I try and tell you because I watched, like I was transfixed as he was talking about how he got into this work, which is because he felt like he had not a demonic possession, but like an infestation.
Mm-hmm.
You were starting off on a light note. His face looked completely different to me. And this was for several minutes. And I was transfixed. And as he was talking later on about, he had this, people should watch the episode. He had this like crazy way of, not crazy, like out there, but just this way of describing, just like these layers of paranormal things, like things on the periphery, almost like a hierarchy, like something on the periphery that might be demonic or something similar. And he's careful about using that word,
right?
Kind of feeding off of the distress that he thought other entities could cause living people.
Mm-hmm.
And as he was talking about these things,
like
kind
parasite?
Of lurking, he was saying it's almost like, a lion waiting while the hyenas like attack something and then going in to take it. And I'm creeped out even just saying that to you.
Right.
But as he was talking about things being on the periphery, I could see these shadows moving around where the ceiling and the wall met. And I tell you, I've watched that episode probably more than I've watched any other episode between the editing and the rewatching it, trying to say, do I see that now?
Right.
But when he was talking about this thing, I know how it's going to sound batshit crazy to a lot of people, but not everybody. I felt like whatever thing is still lingering with him somewhat wanted me to see it.
One was letting you know it was there.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it's kind of like, the other thing we were talking about related to that is that, the whole idea of when somebody's experiencing a haunting, it kind of relates to that in a way. It's kind of like a parallel of that is that, one person or a few people might experience something and then others don't because it just further isolates the person who's having the experiences and amps up their distress. And it was a really psychologically interesting interview. I thought it was really interesting. When you check it out, let me know what you think.
Oh, no, I'm
if
excited
you've watched it.
Yeah.
If anybody listening has watched it, let me know what you think.
I wonder if other
it took
people
me a while
have
to
that
shake that
experience
interview
too.
off.
I wonder if
where
other
they
people
could
have
see
watched
things.
it.
Yeah. And I find too, for anybody who does other types of psychic work more regularly, I know when I'm doing more remote viewing, I feel like my kind of paranormal experience is kind of like there's an uptick, and that's kind of a commonly reported thing. And then when I get away from it, that kind of calms down a little bit.
Right.
But I am interested if other people noticed anything. So while you were having your super spooky adventures actually outside, I was having a little, virtual spooky adventure.
Well, I'm excited to watch it. I'm also going to tell people, if you get the chance to go to Transylvania, please do. It is highly worth the trip. Incredibly luxurious, incredibly accessible. And also, because it never got bombed during any of the wars, the layers of history are definitely there. But it sounds like you had a spookier experience than I did. So I'm kind of excited to see I'm excited to see if I see anything, Yeah,
100%. And it just, so the last creepy factor thing is just that it's like, okay, this is somebody who had been, I don't know if you would call it a professional ghost hunter. I didn't even ask him if they got paid for these things, but certainly a part of an organized team that routinely got contacted and went out and explored these things. And, I kind of do think that, it's worth asking Adam, and I'm curious about your experiences. When you start investigating these things, do people generally notice an uptick in phenomena outside of these experiences? So when you're not ghost hunting, are you now picking up on more stuff?
For me personally, I think that there is a cumulative effect. I always think of it as it's like working a muscle. Like as you push, maybe it's more like you become more aware. So you're not really having more experiences. You're just experiencing more. You know what I mean? So it's like it's always there, but because you've become accustomed to it, or you've become accessible to it, or you're allowing it, you're assigning it a paranormal, instead of being like, oh, the door's shut, I wonder what that was. You're noticing, well, the door's shut and there was nobody there and there's no draft. And, you kind of start to realize that a lot of the things that I just take casually as, just odd experiences, I'm looking at more, but I will say the more psychic things I do, the more I'm involved in psychic stuff, the 100% the more psychic experience I have. If I'm doing something, and I will say too, I recently had a bunch of new stuff come into the museum, the paranormal museum, and that always kicks up activity in the museum for a certain time period. And I don't think I always noticed that. I don't think I always noticed that there was a correlation. But now when I get in new active artifacts, I notice that the entire place becomes more active, which I think is very similar to kind of what you're saying, which is, something gets started and you just start to, it expands kind of either your awareness or your understanding or even your seeing, to where you're having more experiences.
And I think it might kick something up.
That's definitely true. It's like it wakes everything up. But I think part of what you're talking about too is a lot of times a lot of times investigators will talk about, not so much that they're more aware of the paranormal experiences, but that paranormal entities are aware of them. And so,
yes.
As something becomes more aware, so as you kind of become more involved, aware, accepting, adept at paranormal investigation, that you start to, whatever is on the other side. I don't mean you become like a celebrity to the ghosts. I just mean they're
like, oh, they can see us.
Yeah, no,
they can perceive us.
They can see us, and I almost feel like it's something like a scent.
Oh, yeah.
Like you did. So it's not something, like I said, it's not like they're having, AA meetings over there or, they're sitting in a conference room going, pay attention. Kathy Kelly knows about us now. But I do think
but they know that you can perceive them.
and there's something that happens in you that makes you, more obviously, interacting with them. So it becomes a two-way street, whereas before it might not have been.
So I want to tell you something. This is another kind of tangent from that. But as you know, in September, I was at this conference, maybe 90 people. I'm going to say the common thread was remote viewing. And
Right.
the people there happen to be like some of the best remote viewers that are out there, and a lot of other very highly trained ones. I felt kind of like a poser because it's something I study, but I wouldn't call myself like an A+ remote viewer. It's like these are people who are like doing it every day for years, and you can tell.
Right.
And one of the people there who is it's an excellent trainer and an excellent professional remote viewer. I won't say who it is because I don't know if they'd want to say it publicly, but said that when they started doing this more, there were a lot of things that became like, and other people have described this where you become almost too sensitive. You have to have more alone time, etc. But one of the things this person said was they remembered like kind of being in their home and noticing, this gives me the creeps too, but like shadows, like shadow figures, or recent episodes on shadow figures, but all like along the walls, like in various rooms, moving, like she could sense the presence of these things in a multi-sensory way. And it really scared the crap out of her. And, her explanation was, now you've awakened something. That world has always been there.
Well, that's
coexisting,
it. Yeah. Well, and that's what's important to know. Right. And I will say I've had a couple of, there are very few things that scare me,
if it scares you, I don't even want to be near it.
but there's very few things that scare me, mainly because in my experience, there's parameters, there's boundaries, there's limitations, or my understanding is that there is. But not too long ago, I was doing an investigation and, an EVP was captured in the investigation, and I was not in the room when the EVP was captured. So it wasn't like I was there, it was happening. And it was an actual EVP. It wasn't Frank's box or anything like that. It was recorded. And, they were asking, who do you want to talk to? Right. And the device recorded somebody saying Kathy Kelly. Now, what I thought, that unnerved me, right? That unnerved me. It amused me.
That's not just a blip. That's like,
but also it didn't say Kathy. It said Kat. It's like, just so we're clear,
it's not Kathy Jones down the street.
It's not Kathy Murphy. It's not Katie Kelly. It's Kathy Kelly. And this, everybody calls me Kathy Kelly. When you speak to me, you call me Kathy, but when you refer to me, you call me Kathy Kelly. Since I was 6 years old, everyone has called me Kathy Kelly as if my name is like Mary Lou, So it didn't frighten me, but it changed my perspective on what I did. Right. So it changed my perspective to where it's like, wow, is there a community? Is there some kind of conversation that happens? Now, this was at a location that I had not investigated before. Right. So it wasn't in the building. It wasn't in paranormal. It's at a location I hadn't investigated before. It was not aggressive. It was not, and I have done investigations where absolutely the spirits or whoever's communicating is just like, we are sick of hearing from her. We don't want to talk to her. She's too mouthy, or she's too pushy, or she's too whatever. And a lot of times that does happen, especially when you're talking, a lot of times when you're talking to, like 19th century males in kind of rural areas or things. And, I'm not characterizing that, but it does happen. But it was strange, right? Because there was no reason why, other than, and maybe it was just because I was present in the building and they heard, maybe they heard about me, maybe they looked me up on, on,
Known around the
Spookagram or something.
microphone.
But, it did give me a little bit of pause, and it did I have to say, it creeped me out a little bit because I have this sense that when I leave a place, I leave it, like when I leave an investigation, I never am thinking something came home with. I never feel that way. That challenged that for me. The idea that I could be known and requested. You know what I mean? Now, if I had been in the room and it came up, I don't think that would have bothered me as much because it would be like, well, someone said my name and someone said this. But the idea that it came up kind of spontaneously when I wasn't present, I was in the building, but I don't know. It unnerved me a little bit because it challenged, I think it challenged something I didn't know that I believed. I didn't know that I had these kind of set ideologies or set thoughts about it. But I would say that, you start noticing more things, but I do think that, there's a point, especially when you do this a lot, there's a point at which you do realize that something may then be aware of you.
Oh, yeah.
And when that
100%.
happens, you start to realize that investigation is a relationship and not a zoo.
It
right?
might be a stalker relationship.
Yeah,
though.
well,
I don't know if it's not
but
necessarily
it's
the
also-
relationship you want.
It also reinforces the idea, though, that people sometimes investigate and they go in and they're like, oh, I'm going to speak to this consciousness that is in this one moment in its life. Right. It's in this one moment. This specific event happened and I'm going to hone in on that. Right.
And only in this place, as if it can't go somewhere else.
Even if it can't because of its own psychological limitations, even if it's, or physiological or whatever, but that, the presumption that it's there because of its moment of death, or the presumption that it's there because it had this one traumatic experience, as if it's not doing a billion other things or thinking a million other thoughts or growing and changing, doing all of these things. And then to have it be like, who I'd like to talk to? I'd like to talk to her. And what that says is it's paying attention. It has opinions, and it's looking and being like, well, I like the quality of that work or and to be honest with you, I'm going to tease something because it's something that I'm working on. And I mentioned it in one of the other podcasts, but something has been coming up in investigations I've been doing for the last, I'd say 14 months. And I think it's kind of a popular little phrase that people are using now, but I don't think it's new phenomena. I just think it's phenomena that, that just shows how we try to categorize things and how phenomena is a lot more broad and a lot more complex. It doesn't sit comfortably, like things don't necessarily sit comfortably in these little categories that we're doing. And I'm going to work on, I've been working on something that I want to bring up in a later podcast, which is the new concepts of egregores, which are actually tulpas, and how a lot of young investigators, a lot of new investigators are utilizing those terms interchangeably. But also,
and I think you should define them for our audience.
So it's
just
very
in case.
hard. So the podcast that or the episode that I want to do is actually doing the definitions of those. So egregores and tulpas are people who use them interchangeably now. A tulpa, and I'm going to use tulpa because that's I'm old school, so that's what I did. But tulpas are literally sentient beings that have never been incarnate, that are not spirits, that are not demons, that are not elementals, but they are beings of consciousness that are born from the faith, belief, and the power of an individual or a group's thought, right? So in other words, you think a being into existence, it becomes sentient. It also then becomes capable of existing without you, right? So it is a thought being that is
like a
birthed.
thought form that takes on its own kind of
it's a thought form
existence.
that ultimately becomes its own sentient being that operates and exists separate from its creator. So it's, it's a child without a body, and without the limitations of a body. An egregore is, people use it interchangeably now, but I would argue that an egregore is less about a being and more about the sculpting of energy based on people's feelings about it. So if you have kind of random ambient energy in a specific place that is not necessarily sentient, that is not necessarily, it's energy, and it's energy that is colored by emotion. So if you go into a place that looks creepy and you keep being scared of it, it ultimately starts to become something you should be scared of, right? It's ultimately going to,
it with that energy,
and it's not necessarily going to hurt you, but it's emanating something because what it essentially keeps consuming is your fear. So you walk into a place and it's like, it looks creepy in here, I'm scared. And then ultimately you walk into a place and it's scary because it's scary, tulpas are more complex.
So it's interesting because when we do that episode, I'm already thinking, it's like there's the psychological version, right? We infuse the situation with things, our own ideas that it's anxiety provoking, and then we get into it and it actually does provoke anxiety, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or we're not going to do well, and then we get there and we don't do well because of all of the mental
self-fulfilling kind of prophecy stuff.
Right. The other quick thing is, this also came up at the remote viewing conference, that you can, and people have remote viewed things that were mentally constructed and very infused with energy. Right. And it is actually hard to distinguish between something real and something that is a thought form that a ton has been invested into, like a literary character, etc.
Right.
You can, there are people who would be good at saying, oh, and it feels not real.
Right.
I'm just, and my last quick thing about that is Santa Claus and figures like that. I imagine on some astral plane or something is a thought form that is probably now like a being.
Yeah. And there's a great, the famous one is the Philip experiments in in Canadian University in Toronto. And yes, I'll delve into that. The one thing that I would say about tulpas though is in the cultures that believe in them, they are real. They are utterly and completely real. And I think Fortune wrote a lot about them as well. So the reason why I brought it up is because in one of the investigations that I did recently, the investigator believed that they were dealing with an egregore because of some of the information that was coming back. And when I brought up the idea of a tulpa, I realized that, people think that these are essentially interchangeable things. And they're not, because a tulpa becomes a being. An egregore is essentially Play-Doh. Where you put Play-Doh onto a newspaper and pull it off, and it's going to reflect.
So interesting.
You know what it is? It's like when you put food in a refrigerator, and it starts, you put something in the refrigerator and it starts to taste like the smell of a refrigerator. If you don't cover it, you're like, oh, that's just...
It's the ice cubes that didn't change out.
That's it, exactly. But those are some things that I really wanted to bring up, and especially because they came up in investigations, but also because I think that they're really interesting, and I really do think that they come up in people's lives.
Oh, definitely. Kathy, I can hear and see that Zelda is going to tell me that it's time to go outside. I'm only the hired help for my pets here.
That's right.
But this was a great and fun teaser conversation.
Yes.
Everybody, if you have other things you want us to look into, please let us know. Leave us a comment. Go to our website and send us an email. You can do that. We'd love to hear from you, your true stories, your suggestions, your comments, and more. Kathy, any last thoughts before we wrap up for today?
Just in the last couple of weeks, the different investigations that I've done, when I've spoken to people, a lot of them had questions that were about kind of really base paranormal phenomena, stories, entities, theories. If you have something that you'd like us to delve into, I love to be directed in that way because it's a great refresher for me. And, I like to say I'm not a paranormal expert. I'm a student of the paranormal. And so any opportunity that I have to learn more about it is exciting to me. And then to be able to share it with you is even better. So, please let us know what you'd like us to talk about. And, I'll happily do that research.
That's awesome. Well, everyone, as always, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, stay curious.
Keep exploring.
I know that the paranormal
Bye
is
for now.
real. Listen.
This has been another episode of Curious Explorers. If you enjoyed the episode, please do remember to like, share, follow, leave us a comment. Let us know what you'd like to hear more of. And of course, until next time, stay curious.
In the presence of these things, you just feel a primal sense of fear.
Are there things you would say that you would advise people not to do, given what given that you've experienced? Provoking demons and saying, "Come and get me."
No.
We're going to put that on the list.
Don't do anything I do. No. All the stuff that people do, the Ouija boards and all of those things, whenever I hear people are doing, I don't know. I wouldn't. And somebody asked me one time, because, we would go into places and take recorders and do EVP sessions, stuff like that. And they would say, well, isn't that the same thing? The difference is you're not asking something to take over your body to move something. That's just a terrible idea. So, 99% of the time, students doing it drunk, probably nothing's going to happen. But I don't know. We've gone to an awful lot of cases where they'd say, oh, we were just screwing around with a Ouija board.
That the paranormal is real.